that you can go back through when looking? David, you want to answer that?
There is, but it is not a set number. It varies machine to machine and by how much memory and how much memory is available.
It's big enough that you hopefully shouldn't care. You probably have a recursion error if you.
It's actually not.
Oh, it's
So
not?
Python has a very short stack. You can set it somewhere in the sys module. There's a set stack whatever if you look in sys, but by default it's relatively small. Because apparently Python frames are relatively big, so they take up a lot of memory. And when you're doing, I know, stupid recursive things like calculating Fibonacci numbers, it's very easy to run out of stack memory. You can increase it. There's a function somewhere in .sys, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a better answer.
Yeah, that was a much better answer than I did. Thank you, Emily.
In C, it'll just keep going until you start overwriting other memory.
Any other questions? Okay. Are you ready?
You want it on one monitor or two monitors?
One.
Do you want it bigger? Micah is going to talk about Sentry, which is a Python module for aggregating logs and stuff.
And tracebatch.
Sorry?
And tracebatch.
And tracebatch. You should probably make that text bigger if you're going to be showing things there.
Maybe I'll go to the website first and go to the review.
Okay.
So we have this presentations repo, which is where these things normally live eventually. And here's my readme.
You should probably make that bigger still.
How do you make it bigger?
That's Apple. You don't use a Mac either?
No.
Really?
Linux. I might call you back again. So for this project, I actually added a requirements file, so you don't need to track this stuff down. But setting up Sentry and installing Raven, configuring Raven, I added some links there.
What's Raven?
Raven is the thing that reports to Sentry. And there are different clients, or this Raven, or the Raven I'll be using is the Python project, but there's one for JavaScript. I don't know about other languages. Yes.
Can you talk about what the general applications for this are?
Yes, I have a demo project.
I mean, like, why would people use this? What sort of applications would there be?
Basically, or so an example would be that traceback that you saw from Trey. You can have those tracebacks automatically post to some web server, such as a Sentry server. So it'll collect the logs, it'll combine them in some way, it'll show you like total count. You can configure it to email you, stuff like that.
Would this be used for syslogging at all, or is it more on the programming side?
It doesn't read the OS logs. It doesn't read those.
Okay.
Or there are tools that do that, but this doesn't do that. Anyway, so instructions for starting the application. Do I have more than one terminal or just the one?
Just use one.
Just use one.
I mean, you can use more, but then you have to like get virtual and all set up.
Okay. You didn't give me my DB.
Oh, it's in the downloads folder.
Oh.
This still counts as your time.
It's totally fair.
Sorry.
Okay. So we're gonna start Sentry.
I'll make it bigger.
Yeah. The running Sentry is like they have this in their documentation, so this is really just to get the server running. It's the interface that's the most
Or
interesting.
this isn't my machine, so I didn't have it set up. Sentry config run server. Okay. Now, whoa, that is weird. Control what?
You're trying to run the manage pie as well.
Yeah.
So this is your time too. Oh, what?
Just give it a point. 88.
Sloppy man. Your talk's half done.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. So they're both running. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
So as you saw, he copied over the database, so I already have a project set up. You can have multiple teams, you can have multiple projects. Sentry's pretty cool that way. I have some errors here already. Let's see, demo project. So here's a list of the errors that show up. So if I go to I have a Django server running as well, that's the demo project. Then I have a view that will raise an exception. Raise an exception. Then I go back to my Sentry project, and there's 4 now. Actually, I should resolve all of these. Resolve. Alright. Refresh page. There's still an exception. Hopefully. Go back here. Exceptions. So that was stop. I almost feel like pulling out my laptop because now I want to show you guys code. But oh wait, I have presentation Sentry, and I can't get to the back button.
Hold the command button.
That's too easy. Okay, so demo project views. If you are familiar with Django, you will know where I'm going. If you aren't, I apologize. So here's a view that would normally return a response object. I'm just raising an exception. That's what's happening over here. And then it actually does a post to the Sentry server. Here's a logging view. I'm creating a logger by taking the logging library, saying .getLogger. The awesome part about logging is it doesn't, or you can do it without interrupting the flow of your project. So here I'm using the logger to log an error, and then I'm still returning a response. So if I use the logging demo, so here's the response that my logging demo is returning, and then there's my logging view. I don't know why it's sending 3. It could be because I'm running in debug. Actually, it probably is, but. And then we talked about tracebacks. If I. Where are the tracebacks? Is it further down?
No, the other one.
Go up a little bit.
They should
And
both
see
have
where
tracebacks.
Request. No, go back to your actual exception.
They should both have tracebacks, but here's the one for this one. So you can see this bottom line, which is apparently the most important, raises the or has the raise exception right there. And then the line before, you can see where Django core handler does the exception handling. That's about it.
What would I use this for?
What?
What would you use this
What
for?
would I use this for? I'm playing the devil's advocate. I use this.
You use this, yeah. Actually, I'm curious, who does use this? Yeah, so a bunch of people peppered throughout the room. What would you use this for? Anytime you have a system running and you don't want to actually watch the logs go by, basically, right? You have a web server up, an exception happens, you want to catch it somewhere, you can have it post to a Sentry server and then view the logs later. As you saw, I added Sentry as a logging handler, so you could add it for basically any project, any Python project that has where you could institute logging. there's a JavaScript library where you can have JavaScript errors caught and posted to that as well. There's another project that's similar but different, New Relic. If anybody's familiar with that, it gives some other system information as well, but it does this sort of thing. Yes.
Can you authenticate logging requests so nobody can just spam your log server if they got mad at you or something?
Because this one's posting from the back end, you would just protect or firewall it. There is a secret code that's being posted though, so without the secret code and without posting to the correct hostname, it wouldn't have ended up in the log.
You can post over SSL as well, so
Okay.
that it's harder than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've wanted this in our JavaScript, and that's part of the reason that they won't let me do it. Yeah, somewhere there's configurations, but I don't configure this all that often, so I actually don't know my way around the UI too much.
Sorry, I'm not sure I heard that right. So you said they won't, like it doesn't work over SSL, or
It does.
It does work over SSL.
It can.
You.
Any other questions?
I'm curious to know how much time it saves you. Like, does it just save you a lot of time going back and combing through the code to actually find the traceback error embedded in all the code, or is what?
Well, it does have a friendly UI for looking at the traceback, so I guess that's a plus.
What's the main purpose you would do this?
Versus what?
Like, I still, like, you were playing the devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm still unclear as to exactly what is it for.
So we have a web server, so we need to log those exceptions somewhere.
Okay.
So this is where we log them.
Is the sentry, is it searchable?
Yes.
You can search it, yeah.
It really helps
So that, that
It also has context. It can show you which user was logged in when the error happened.
Yeah, you can also
from an operations perspective.
you can also have it email you whenever there's an exception. Which, if you've got a really noisy sentry like some people have, that might not be a good idea.
Stop judging.
But if you've got a small site, or you've got, if exceptions are a rare thing, then it can be really useful to have it email you every time there's an error, because then you know before you get the phone call from the CEO that the site's down.
So just some other benefits from an operations perspective. If you have a large infrastructure with multiple servers, one of the nice things about centralized logging like this is you can give developers access to your log files without giving them access to all the servers that are generating them. That's a real plus. The logs being searchable, another huge plus, because you don't have to sit there and comb and grep log files as they're happening or in the past. To have that one location is big. And like I said, the larger your infrastructure is, the more beneficial it is.
Also, sometimes logs are insufficient. In the case of Sentry, for the traceback talk I just gave, all those stack frames, every one of those in Sentry, when it shows them, it shows you all the local variables.
Yeah.
So if you want to inspect any frame of any function that you're in, you can do so. And it works for PHP and Node.js, and I think even the exceptions can be taught for those languages too.
I don't know if it was, it was in the talk, but it may not have stuck out to some people. It also aggregates exceptions. So if the same type of exception happens on the same line of code, it's probably the same exception.
And you only
so
get
it
one
groups
email.
these things together. So, it'll say this exception on your production website has happened 1,000 times. This one has only happened once. This one's happened 25 times. And so, that can help you prioritize things. It can tell you whether things are still happening after you've done an update. It can tell you a variety of things like that. Let me tell you, if you have things email you, be very careful. Your email client will not handle 8,000 emails. And by your email client, I mean your one on your phone. Best way, delete your email client, re-download.
That's
Personal
another.
experience there?
Yes.
Yeah, if you are grepping a log file and emailing yourself, don't. Because if you have 10,000 people visit your website and an exception happens for all of them, you're going to get 10,000 emails. Whereas with Sentry, you'll get one if it's the same exception.
Along those lines, I was wondering if the Sentry has more advanced features. to support that. So, like, can you prioritize log entries so that you only get email for some of them, like filter out lower priority ones, and then can you rate limit emails?
Yes. And you can also rate limit the number of requests that you get coming into the server as well. So even if somebody does get your API key, they can't like completely flood you, they can just be very annoying.
Right. The answer was yes on both of those.
Is the 3 and the 6, or are the 3 and the 6?
Those are counts.
Those are counts, right? So, is there any way to show the errors happening in chronological order? Like, instead of having them aggregated immediately like that?
I don't think you can unaggregate them. Or I can go into a specific one and iterate through each instance, but there's really only value of seeing an error. Or it's the same error that's happening over and over, so I don't know why you would want to view them as a list.
Well,
It does
you're
show them
saying
in
3 and
chronological
6.
order. That actually was in chronological order when it was, but the top one had been last seen more recently than the one.
There's,
Well, I
yeah,
guess
there's,
what I'm thinking of is, if I've got one error that seems to happen, but from different paths. Do you know what I mean? I might think, okay, well, this happens once, and
those are different errors. Or like when
Oh,
we're
they're
talking
listed
about
as different
errors,
errors?
yeah, those would be different.
oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Or it's not an exception class, it's not even the exception value. The stack trace has to basically match.
Okay. I see.
Can you set up alerts with that?
Yeah, we were talking about email alerts earlier. I don't know of any other type of alerts though.
There is. There's a plugin for that. There's a plugin for IRC. There's a plugin to SMS your phone if you really hate yourself. Yeah.
Oh, there's a plugin for GitHub pull requests, I think. Like you can go to an exception and then tell it to open a pull request on GitHub with the traceback included.
You mean an issue?
It will open
You're
an
right,
issue
an
there.
issue, not a pull request.
There's also a plugin to do that in Jira.
Yeah, it won't fix your code for you.
That would be beautiful. I would love so much more.
So Paul, you're using
Yeah,
your
I'm
own
not
laptop?
fighting your computer.
Whatever, man.
I have an
Computer
Apple II.
works great.
Yeah, that's it.
It's probably my fault.
Yes, it's definitely your fault for not having a Mac.
Is this our last talk?
It is our last talk unless somebody speaks up. So Paul is going to talk about a fixtures library called
Factory Boy.
Factory Boy.
Which, that's the Tesla factory, in case you guys have never seen the Tesla factory. It's pretty awesome. That is not my fault.
This is part of your time.
I haven't started the timer, but
Yes, it is.
I didn't. I just turned it on.
Can I ask a question about Sentry?
Sure.
Can you use it with hardware or is it just for website?
There's a logging client for Sentry, so you could, if you're willing to write a plugin for Raven, which will accept, there's a format for how you send messages to Sentry. So technically, you could make it go from hardware.
anything
That would be
has
really
loggers
interesting. Yeah.
and internet access, because you can connect to your server.
So my talk is kind of intermediate to intermediate advanced Django. So how many people here are using Django? Just so I know how fast I can go. Okay, cool. So Factory Boy is a testing tool, which you are all writing tests, I sincerely hope. It just builds models for you. That doesn't sound very exciting until you have lots of models. There are similar tools out there called, one of them is Model Mommy. I don't really know the story why he called it Model Mommy, but okay. You can create models by hand, which, God help you if you start changing your models, and that will happen after you've run a Django site for a little while. And there's fixtures, and don't do that. Just save yourself a lot of pain and suffering later because you do not want to be editing JSON files by hand that are not pretty printed just because you decided to add a new field in your database that's not required. So, this becomes important when you've got, say like an address, which has a street, which also has like a street number, and all of these things are required, and you could attach this to a person who possibly works the business, and he has an employment history.